Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you. If you are new to this study, I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin, and it's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we will be looking at the book of Nahum, chapter 2. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Nahum, chapter 2, grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, and grab a snack. Let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I do pray that your day has been going well. Pray that your week's been going well so far. Happy Thursday. Good to be with you here again this evening as we continue our journey through the Bible one chapter at a time, and we are now in the book of Nahum, chapter 2. And if you recall, we began looking at this book last night, and we stopped at verse 14 of chapter 1. And so we're going to pick up tonight in verse 15 of chapter 1, and then we'll get into chapter 2. But this is the second major part of this book. It's going to take us all the way from verse 15 tonight of chapter 1 through the midpoint of chapter 3 tomorrow. And this section contains another introduction and descriptions of Nineveh's coming destruction. And we're going to see four specific descriptions of Nineveh's destruction. So having revealed these general statements about God's judgment in chapter 1, Nahum now is going to communicate to the Ninevites more specific details about this coming demise. And as we saw in chapter 1 last night, it's not just about the destruction of Nineveh. There is also a message of hope and promises to the restoration of Israel that we will see in this chapter tonight. So let's get right into it here. Open up your Bibles first to Nahum chapter 1, verse 15. That's where we're going to start. And if you don't have your Bible with you, not a problem. As always, all the verses are up here on the screen for you so you can follow along and take some good notes. And let's begin chapter 1, verse 15, and then we'll get into chapter 2. And again, this is why did we wait on this verse? Well, this is a transitional verse. In the Hebrew Bible, this is the first verse of the second chapter. But this verse, it looks back to what we just looked at in chapter 1, and it looks forward to what follows in chapter 2. So verse 15 of chapter 1. Behold, look, there on the mountains, the feet of one who brings good news, who proclaims peace. So here Nahum is calling on his listeners to pay attention, because someone is coming over the mountains with good news, a good news message of peace. And so the people of Judah should rejoice, because they're going to be able to celebrate their festivals, right? That means they have a future. So next verse, celebrate your festivals, Judah. Fulfill your vows. They should pay their vows to the Lord, because he's now answered their prayers. And no more will the wicked invade you. They will be completely destroyed. So these Assyrians, these wicked Assyrians, would never again pass through the land of Judah as they had done so many times and so freely in the past. Now they would be completely cut off, and they would be no longer a threat in the future. And Nahum here is speaking as if Nineveh's already fallen. And this messenger has already arrived with good news. And again, this is prophecy, so this has not happened yet. But he's speaking as if it is. Now, this same sentiment, it appeared when we looked at Isaiah chapter 52, verse 7. where the messenger came to announce the defeat of Babylon. We saw the same type of a message in Isaiah 52:7. How beautiful the mountain are on the mountains are the feet of the one who brings good news, who proclaims peace. That was a reference to the messenger bringing peace about this defeat of the Babylonians. Here, Nahum makes reference to somebody bringing good news about peace from the Assyrians. Paul, the Apostle Paul, quotes the very first part of this verse in his letter to the Romans, to the church in Rome, chapter 10, verse 15. And he quotes this verse, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And he does this as a reference to messengers who also bring good news, which in the case of Paul was the good news of the gospel. So this message, it's a message of peace. It's a peace from external oppression of the Assyrians, and it's a peace, a kind of peace of that comes from God. It's peace with God, who is the giver of life. So this is a good message of hope coming to the Judeans following this oracle of war, destruction against the Assyrians. So now let's get into chapter 2, and let's look at these descriptions of these coming attacks on Nineveh. So chapter 2, verse 1, an attacker advances against you. So whereas for Judah, a messenger of peace was coming, here to Nineveh, a attacker is advancing. So Nahum turns his attention from addressing the people of Judah to now he's addressing the people of Nineveh. And he's speaking here in such a way in which these future events appear as though they've already happened in the past. And he's doing this just to heighten the certainty that this is to come. An attacker was coming. One in some translations, it's a scatterer, is going to come against Nineveh. This is common imagery for a conquering king, an attacker, a scatterer. This isn't just somebody coming to wage war. This is going to be a victorious king. Next verse, guard the fortress, watch the road, brace yourselves, marshal all your strength. So as a consequence of this attacker coming, the Ninevites needed to man their posts, right? Get to the fortress, watch the road for the coming invader, and then strengthen your foothold, which of course is all going to prove to be futile because God's going to destroy this city. So this is sarcasm. Nahum is speaking sarcastically. In many interpretations, this is a song of taunting, right? This isn't a call to arms. This is a sarcastic song. Because even though the Ninevites were going to do all these things, man their posts and watch the road and brace themselves, it's not going to stop anything. They're not going to escape God's judgment. And this invader, this victorious king that Nahum is prophesying here, proved to be Xerxes of the Medes and Nabopolassar of the Babylonians. And if you recall, we talked about how the Babylonians and the Medes joined forces to come and overthrow the Assyrians, and that's what's taking place here. But the scatterer as a whole is God, because he's behind this whole thing. So yes, this enemy is coming, but only because God is allowing it to be so. Verse 2. And then the Lord will restore the splendor of Jacob, just like he restored the splendor of Israel. So turning now back to Judah, right? This is a back and forth that Nahum is speaking to the Judeans, then to the Ninevites, now back to the Judeans. And Nahum is reporting that God is promising to restore the nation Israel to its former glory. A destroyer was coming to destroy Nineveh. restoration is coming to Israel. God's going to restore Judah, which is the opposite fate of Nineveh, which is destruction. And at this time, these would have been words of hope because Nineveh enjoyed the glory. They were the dominant power at this time. Israel was suffering devastation because of the Assyrians. It's all going to reverse. Nineveh is going to suffer destruction. Israel is going to experience restoration and return to glory. Next verse. Though destroyers have laid them waste and have ruined their vines. So these invading Assyrians, no doubt when they came in to destroy things, they ravaged the land as well. And they destroyed many of Israel's grapevines, the agricultural product. But vines here, it symbolizes the Israelites. So the Lord will restore the splendor of Jacob. Jacob recalls the acts of deceit. That's the deceptive part of the history of Israel. But he will restore Jacob like the splendor of Israel. Israel was the name connected with the former glory of this nation, even though destroyers have laid them waste and have ruined the vines, the people. So God's going to restore this nation to its glory, and this restoration is to come. It's a distant future event, and it takes place in the millennial reign of Christ, the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. And so now we come to these four descriptions of Nineveh's fall in the rest of this chapter here. So the rest of this chapter, in fact, the rest of the book, really, tomorrow as well, we see these four descriptions of Nineveh's fall. And these were messages that Nahum was delivering at various times throughout his prophecy. So verses 3 through 7, we see the first description of the fall of Nineveh. And this is a detailed siege taking place when this enemy, the Medes and the Babylonians, attack. And it ends in verse 7. And so Nahum, again, he's focusing on the destroyer, the scatterer that we saw in verse 1. And here he's going to describe the siege and the capture of Nineveh. So verse 3. The shields of the soldiers are red. The warriors are clad in scarlet. So the shields and the uniforms of the soldiers who invaded Nineveh were going to be red. And in fact, red was the favorite color militarily of the Medes and the Babylonian armies. They preferred to wear red, just like the British wore red in the Revolution. The Medes, the Babylonians, are wearing red shields, armament, uniforms. What this speaks to is coming warfare and blood and violence. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 5, we see a reference to the custom that the Assyrians had of rolling their outer garments in blood before a battle in order to try to strike fear into their enemy. Here, what's going to happen is the tables are going to be turned. It's the Babylonians and the Medes that are going to strike fear into the Assyrians. And while others, the Babylonians, the Medes, they are going to have shields and spears and chariots. They are going to be on the offensive. The people of Nineveh were going to be bathed in blood, bathed in their own blood. This is horrific warfare here. Next verse. The metal on the chariots flash on the day that they are made ready, and the spears of juniper are brandished. So Nahum sees these invading chariots that are flashing with steel in the sunlight, and these chariots with steel blades protruding from the wheels That's what was used in this time. Very destructive as these chariots came in with these spinning blades on the wheels turning as the wheels turn. The spears made out of juniper, these would have been long spears. Uh, Nineveh's invaders, the Babylonians, the Medes, they're going to brandish these spears, which just is a symbolism of they are ready for battle. All right, so this is going to be a bloodbath here. Next verse. The chariots stormed through the streets, rushing back and forth through the squares. Remember these chariots with these blades on the wheels spinning frantically as the chariots were pulled. They look like flaming torches. They dart about like the lightning. These chariots are going to race through the streets of Nineveh, and the steel would be gleaming in the sunlight that it would look like lightning. The armament of the soldiers would be blood red, looking like torches. And they were going to advance towards the city walls, and we're going to see that here in a second in verse 5. So what Nahum sees is this advancing, intimidating army coming into this sprawling, well-fortified city, Nineveh, and leveling it. Verse 5. So Nineveh summons her picked troops, her choice soldiers, but they stumble on their way. So the king of Assyria is going to call on his nobles to defend the city. That's the picked troops. But they're going to stumble in their haste to do so. They're going to trip over themselves. They dash to the city wall. Their protective shield is put in place. So they're going to try to carry out this order to defend the city. They're going to hurry to the walls of Nineveh to try to set up some type of a protective shield to deflect the spears of the advancing army of Babylon and the arrows and the stones. But verse 6, the river gates are open, and the Tigris River is what this is a reference to. So the gates would be thrown open. The Tigris River, which was close to the walls of Nineveh, would pour into the city. Nahum sees these invaders opening these floodgates and flooding the city. And that is very possible what's happened here. Throughout history, though, many ancient historians wrote that when Nineveh fell, much of it was due to flooding that had come from heavy rains in the area as well. So regardless of what's taking place here, the floodgates are thrown open, the flood waters rush in, and the next verse, the palace collapses. So Assyria had ruined many enemy cities, and they had conquered many enemy palaces. Now it's being reversed, and that's what's happening to them as they fall. Everything that they did in destroying other temples, other palaces, it's now happening to them. Verse 7, it is decreed that Nineveh be exiled and carried away. This is the Lord's judgment of Nineveh, and God is declaring it. And the city is going to be stripped of its treasures, and these treasures and their possessors, the people, were all going to be captured, carried away into exile, into various other places, primarily into Babylon and elsewhere. Next verse, her female slaves moan like doves and beat on their breast, even the slave girls who were the bottom of the social scale, as well as the nobles that we saw in verse 5 that the king summoned. But even the slave girls at the very bottom to the nobles at the very top, they're all going to lament the fall of this city. And the slave girls in their mourning would make these groanful sounds and beat their breasts like doves. Now, doves are mentioned not because they are timid, not because they are helpless, but because the way that they cooed resembled the sound of a crying lamentation. And that's what that is a reference to. Now, normally, you would expect slaves within a city to rejoice that they are being liberated from their captivity, their enslavement, with the destruction of this city. That would have meant freedom. But life in Nineveh was good for even the slaves. And so even they are bemoaning the fall of this city, even though they are set free. So that's the first description of Nineveh's fall. Verses 8 through 13 offer us the second. And this is a more philosophical description. And it's going to end with a statement by God, verse 13, that gives the reason for this demise. So verse 8, Nineveh is like a pool whose water is draining away. Stop, stop, they cry, but no one turns back. So Nineveh had been as placid as the waters around it for most of their history. And so this is the first explicit reference to Nineveh since chapter 1, verse 1. But because of what we heard in the early prophecy of Nahum in chapter 1, we know that this is a reference to what's going to happen in this city. Nahum sees Nineveh flooded, inundated with water, and everybody's fleeing in panic. From it's almost like a dam has broken, right, and water's pouring out into a city below the dam, and so everybody's fleeing. Somebody's going to call, stop, don't run, come back and defend us. But no one's going to turn back. That's what that means. Stop, but no one turns back. Verse 9, plunder the silver, plunder the gold. The supply is endless, the wealth from all of its treasure. So these invading soldiers now are going to come in, plunder Nineveh, and take this vast wealth of gold and silver and valuable treasures. And again, who are these invaders? These are the Babylonians and the Medes. How did Nineveh acquire all this wealth? They acquired it from their conquests of other nations, plundering other nations, including Israel, taking all of their treasure back with them. They had unjustly taxed other nations. They had cheated in how they traded with other nations, and so they had acquired great wealth. In fact, Nineveh was the richest city in the 7th century BC at this time. And so now the Medes and the Babylonians are coming in to breach these walls. And history records that the Medes were the first. They were the first to breach the defenses of Nineveh. And then the Babylonians later would come in and successfully attack the city. But the Medes weren't interested in occupying the land. They wanted the wealth. They wanted a quick profit. The Babylonians wanted occupation. The Medes wanted the wealth. So this is verse 9, a reference to the Medes arriving first. Verse 10, she is pillaged, plundered, stripped. So all of these invaders were going to empty Nineveh of their treasures, and this city would become a desolate wasteland. And it's interesting here in the Hebrew, and I've tried to share this throughout, but the Hebrew words for she is pillaged, plundered, when you recite the Hebrew, it sounds like water flowing out of a bottle. So it's like when you say these words, it's like, ha, right? Like water rushing out. So even the description of the fall of Nineveh sounds like what happened with the fall of Nineveh. It's this rushing in of water, flooding the city, and then these invaders coming in to plunder it. Hearts melt, knees give way, bodies tremble, and every face grows pale. So hearts would melt, knees would knock. When the people see this overthrow, they're going to tremble in fear, and anguish is going to grip the city to the point that their faces go pale. This is complete destruction of their city as they knew it. And everybody had to be thinking, if Nineveh could fall, how can anything be secure? Verse 11, So where now is the lion's den, the place where they feed or fed their young, where the lion and lioness went, and the cubs with nothing to fear? So after Nineveh's destruction, the people who remained there were going to taunt the Assyrians by comparing Nineveh to a lion's den and the area around it being the feeding grounds. Assyria used this image of a lion quite a bit. They referred to their leaders as being like lions. Its youth were like young lions because they preyed on other people and they plundered other people. But now, where is your lion's den? Where is the place where you could feed your young, right? Everything is again going to be desolate. So verse 12, the lion killed enough for his cubs and strangled the prey for his mate, filling his lairs with the kill and his dens with the prey. So lions normally only kill what they need to eat. They don't kill just for the sake of killing. The Assyrians killed just for the sake of killing. It wasn't just to sustain their own needs. It was for the pleasure of conquest. The Assyrians were notorious for being extremely cruel. They were vicious towards their enemies. Lions are vicious, but not excessively so. They kill to survive. The Assyrians killed for pleasure. And so this verse here, the lion killed enough for its cubs and strangled and filled its... But here's what God is going to say in verse 13 about this. I am against you. I am against you, declares the Lord Almighty. So Nahum concludes this message with a word from God in which God speaks his antagonism against these cruel, heartless people, these Ninevites, and say, I am against you. And what a horrible fate that is, to hear God Almighty say, I am against you. I will burn up your chariots in smoke, and the sword will devour your young lions, and I will leave you no prey on earth. So God's promising to destroy these instruments of warfare that Nineveh used in the past, and these invading armies would kill her young lions, her men, her soldiers. And the Assyrians would no longer be able to pounce on these defenseless nations like a lion pounces on its prey. They would no longer be able to devour helpless people like a lion devours helpless prey. And the voices of your messengers will no longer be heard. So these messengers of Nineveh would no longer depart Nineveh with threats to other nations and demands for submission upon these other nations, or words with unjust taxation to come upon these nations. This is complete destruction for Nineveh. Their way of life as they knew it is now coming to an end. And that is the book of Nahum, chapter 2. And I pray that that has been a help to you. Tomorrow we'll wrap up the week by wrapping up the book. We'll look at chapter 3. Again, there's only 3 chapters in this book. So we'll look at that tomorrow, and then Monday we will plan on the next book, which will be the book of Habakkuk, which is also only 3 chapters, and then Zephaniah is only 3 chapters. We may be able to do both of those books next week. We'll see how it goes. But thank you for being here this evening. I do pray that this has been a help. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Till then, take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.